There is a theater playing in your mind right now. You cannot see the stage, but you feel the weight of the curtain. It is heavy, velvet, dark red, like the color of secrets kept too long. The air smells of old wood and something else, something you cannot name, but recognize instantly. It is the scent of performance, of survival, of the 1,000 tiny lies we tell ourselves before breakfast. You are sitting in the audience, but you are also on the stage. This is the paradox of being human. We watch ourselves perform, and we believe the performance is real. We applaud our own deceptions. We bow to our own shadows. Let me tell you something about the world you inhabit. It is not the world you think you see. The faces around you, the smiles in your timeline, the carefully curated moments of joy and success. They are not windows into truth. They are mirrors reflecting what we wish to be seen. And behind each mirror, there is a room. A dark room where the real person sits, breathing quietly, counting the cost of the mask they wear. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago. He wrote about power, about princes, about the machinery of control. But what he really wrote about was you. He wrote about the person you become when no one is watching. The person you become when everything depends on the impression you make. The person who learns, slowly and painfully, that survival sometimes requires becoming someone else entirely. Before we continue, a warning. The knowledge that is about to be shared cannot be unlearned. It will permanently change the way you see human relationships. If you are ready to abandon comfortable illusions and see what is behind the stage, subscribe now. Because this is not just a video. It is the beginning of your journey under the mask. Now let us begin. Picture a woman. Let us call her Elena. She is 32 years old, and she works in an office with glass walls and artificial light that makes everyone look slightly ill. Elena has learned something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. She has learned that authenticity is a luxury, and she cannot afford it. Every morning, Elena stands in front of her bathroom mirror for exactly 7 minutes. This is not vanity. This is preparation. She applies her makeup with the precision of a soldier preparing for battle, because that is what her day will be. A battle, not with weapons, but with words, with glances, with the careful modulation of her voice when she speaks to her manager, who has the power to promote her or to keep her exactly where she is, invisible and replaceable. Elena practices her smile, not the real smile, the one that comes unbidden when she sees her daughter laugh. No, this is the professional smile, the one that reaches her eyes just enough to seem genuine, but not so much that it reveals anything true about what she feels. She has calibrated this smile over years. It is her armor. When she arrives at work, she greets her colleagues with warmth that is both real and performed. This is the complexity that Machiavelli understood. The best masks are not complete fabrications. They are exaggerations of truth, carefully selected aspects of ourselves amplified while other parts are hidden in shadow. Elena genuinely likes some of her co-workers, but she also knows that liking someone and trusting them are different things entirely. She has seen what happens to people who confuse the two. There is a man in her office named Marcus. He sits 3 desks away, and he is always helpful, always offering assistance, always remembering birthdays and asking about your weekend with what seems like genuine interest. Elena watches him carefully. She has learned to read the micro-expressions that flicker across faces before the mask settles back into place. And she has seen something in Marcus that others miss. When he helps someone, there is a calculation happening behind his eyes. He is making deposits in an invisible bank, and one day, he will come to collect. This does not make Marcus evil. This makes him human. This makes him a player in the same game that Elena plays, that you play, that we all play, whether we admit it or not. The game of social survival, the game of positioning, the game of making sure that when the music stops, you have a chair. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But he was writing for princes, for people with obvious power. The rest of us have learned a more subtle lesson. It is better to be underestimated than understood. It is better to let people think they know you while you keep your true self locked away in that dark room behind the mirror. Elena has a colleague named Sarah who believes in authenticity. Sarah talks about bringing your whole self to work. She shares her struggles openly. She cries in meetings when she is overwhelmed. She believes that vulnerability is strength, and perhaps in some ideal world, she would be right. But this is not that world. Elena has watched as Sarah has been passed over for promotions, as her emotional honesty has been reframed as instability, as her authenticity has become a weapon used against her. Elena feels something when she sees this happen. It is not quite pity. It is not quite relief that she is not the one being diminished. It is something more complex, something that sits in her chest like a stone. It is the knowledge that she made the right choice in wearing her mask, combined with the grief of knowing that the choice was necessary. This is the weight that Machiavelli never fully articulated. The psychological cost of strategic living, the exhaustion of constant performance, the slow erosion of the boundary between who you are and who you pretend to be. Let us shift our gaze now to another theater, another stage. A man named David, 45 years old, married for 18 years. He sits across from his wife at dinner, and they are having a conversation that is really several conversations layered on top of each other like transparent sheets of glass. On the surface, they are discussing their son's grades. Beneath that, they are negotiating power. Beneath that, they are avoiding talking about the distance that has grown between them like a cold fog. David has become a master of a strategic pause. When his wife says something that irritates him, he does not react immediately. He has learned that the first response is always emotional, always revealing. So he waits. He takes a breath. He lets 3 seconds pass, which is long enough to choose his words, but not so long that the silence becomes obvious. And then he responds with carefully measured calm. His wife, Jennifer, has her own strategies. She has learned to frame her needs as concerns for others. She does not say, "I want to spend more time together." She says, "I think it would be good for the kids if we had more family dinners." She has learned that direct requests can be denied, but concerns for the children are harder to dismiss. This is not manipulation in the cruel sense. This is adaptation. This is what happens when two people love each other, but have also learned that love alone is not enough to navigate the complex machinery of a shared life. Machiavelli wrote about maintaining power, but what is a marriage if not a constant negotiation of power? Who decides how money is spent? Who decides where you live? Who decides how you spend your time? These questions are rarely discussed openly. Instead, they are resolved through 1,000 small interactions, each one a move in a game that both players pretend they are not playing. David remembers when he and Jennifer first met. He remembers a night when they stayed up until dawn talking, and he told her things he had never told anyone. He showed her the person behind his mask, and it felt like freedom. It felt like coming home. But that was 20 years ago, and they were different people then. Or perhaps they were the same people, just naive enough to believe that intimacy could be sustained without strategy. Now, David keeps certain thoughts to himself, not because he does not love his wife, but because he has learned that some truths create more problems than they solve. When he feels attracted to a woman at work, he does not mention it. When he feels disappointed by choices they have made together, he reframes it as acceptance. When he feels the weight of responsibilities he never wanted, he tells himself that this is what it means to be an adult. And Jennifer does the same. She has her own dark room, her own hidden self. She has dreams she has stopped mentioning because she has learned that David responds to them with a kind of patient condescension that makes her feel small. She has frustrations that she channels into other outlets, into conversations with friends, into long walks where she imagines different versions of her life. They are not unhappy. This is important to understand. They have built something real together. They have children they love. They have a history that binds them. But they have also learned to perform for each other, to show edited versions of themselves, to maintain a kind of peace that requires constant, invisible labor. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the part of ourselves that we hide from the world and often from ourselves. He believed that integration of the shadow was necessary for psychological wholeness. But what Jung did not fully address is that society punishes shadow integration. We are rewarded for maintaining our masks, for keeping our darker impulses and uncomfortable truths locked away. We are rewarded for being predictable, manageable, safe. Consider the person you are at work versus the person you are with your oldest friend. Consider the version of yourself you present to your parents versus the version you show to your romantic partner. These are not lies, exactly. They are facets. But the question that haunts us, the question that wakes us at 3 in the morning, is this: which one is real? Or are they all performances? And the real you is something that exists only in that dark room, watching all the other versions of yourself move through the world like actors on a stage? Let us return to Elena. It is late afternoon now, and she is in a meeting. Her manager is presenting a project that Elena actually developed. She watches as he describes her ideas as if they were his own, as he receives nods of approval from senior leadership. Elena's face remains neutral. She has learned that visible anger is a trap. It marks you as difficult, as not a team player, as someone who cares more about credit than results. But inside, in that dark room, she is making calculations. She is deciding whether to speak up now or to wait. She is weighing the cost of confrontation against the cost of silence. She is playing a game of chess where the board is invisible and the rules change depending on who is watching. She decides to wait. After the meeting, she approaches her manager privately. She does this carefully, framing her concern not as accusation, but as clarification. She says, "I want to make sure I understand how to support this project going forward, since I was involved in the initial development." She says it with a smile, with that carefully calibrated warmth that suggests collaboration rather than conflict. Her manager looks at her, and for just a moment, his mask slips. She sees the flash of recognition, the awareness that he has been caught. But then his mask settles back into place, and he thanks her for her contributions, assures her that her role will be acknowledged. They both know this is a lie. They both know that acknowledgement will come in some vague, diluted form that protects his position while giving her just enough to prevent escalation. Elena walks back to her desk, and she feels that stone in her chest again. She has won a small victory, but it tastes like ash, because the real victory would be working in a place where such strategies were unnecessary. The real victory would be a world where competence was recognized without requiring political maneuvering. But that world does not exist, and Elena is too pragmatic to waste energy wishing for it. This is the Machiavellian reality that we all inhabit, but rarely name. We live in systems that reward strategic behavior, that punish authenticity, that require us to become skilled performers or be left behind. And then we wonder why we feel disconnected from ourselves, why we feel exhausted by interactions that should be simple, why we lie awake at night feeling like frauds. But here is the deeper truth, the one that sits beneath all the strategy and performance. We are not frauds. We are survivors. We are people doing our best to navigate systems that were not designed for human flourishing. We are people trying to protect ourselves, to advance ourselves, to create some measure of security in an uncertain world. The mask is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of adaptation. Machiavelli has been misunderstood for centuries. People read The Prince and see a manual for cruelty, for ruthless self-interest. But what Machiavelli really wrote about was the gap between how we wish the world worked and how it actually works. He wrote about the danger of being good in a world that does not reward goodness. He wrote about the necessity of understanding power if you want to survive in systems built on power. And our world is built on power. Your workplace is a power structure. Your family is a power structure. Your friendships, your romantic relationships, your social media presence. All of these are arenas where power is negotiated, where status is established, where we position ourselves relative to others. This does not mean that love is fake or that kindness is impossible. It means that love and kindness exist within these power structures, and pretending otherwise makes us vulnerable. Elena loves her daughter with a fierce, uncomplicated devotion. But even in that relationship, there is power. There are moments when she must decide whether to be her daughter's friend or her authority figure. There are moments when she must choose between giving her daughter what she wants and giving her what she needs. These are power decisions, even if we do not like to think of them that way. Let us consider another character in this theater of human behavior. A young man named Alex, 24 years old, trying to build a presence on social media. Alex has learned that authenticity is a brand. He has learned that people respond to vulnerability, but only certain kinds of vulnerability. the kind that is relatable but not too dark, the kind that shows struggle but ends with triumph, the kind that makes people feel inspired rather than uncomfortable. So Alex curates his authenticity. He shares his mental health journey, but he edits out the parts that are too raw, too messy, too real. He talks about his anxiety, but he frames it in ways that are digestible, that fit into the narrative arc that his audience expects. He is being honest, but he is also performing honesty. And the line between the two has become so blurred that he is no longer sure where one ends and the other begins. Alex has a friend named Maya who refuses to play this game. Maya posts whatever she wants, whenever she wants. She does not care about engagement metrics or follower counts. She is, by all appearances, genuinely authentic. And Alex admires this about her. But he also notices that Maya's reach is limited. Her honesty does not translate into influence. Her authenticity does not open doors. This creates a moral dilemma that Alex thinks about often. Is it better to be purely authentic and have limited impact, or to strategically curate your authenticity and reach more people? Is it better to be completely yourself and speak to a small audience, or to be a carefully edited version of yourself and speak to thousands? Machiavelli would say that the question itself reveals a naive understanding of human nature. He would say that we are always performing, always editing, always presenting a version of ourselves shaped by context and audience. The person you are with your grandmother is not the person you are at a party. The person you are in a job interview is not the person you are alone in your car. We are all multiple selves, and the idea of a single, authentic self is itself a fiction. But this is a disturbing thought. It suggests that there is no core you, no essential self beneath all the performances. It suggests that you are nothing more than the sum of your masks, a collection of context-dependent performances with no stable center. Jung would disagree. He would say that the self exists, but it is not simple or singular. It is complex, contradictory, containing multitudes. The work of individuation, of becoming whole, is not about finding your one true self. It is about integrating all yourselves, acknowledging all your masks, bringing the shadow into the light. But how do we do this in a world that punishes shadow integration? How do we acknowledge our darker impulses, our selfish desires, our capacity for manipulation and cruelty, when doing so marks us as dangerous or damaged? The answer is that most of us do not. Most of us keep our shadows locked away. We perform goodness while privately acknowledging our complexity. We present simplified versions of ourselves while knowing that the truth is messier, darker, more interesting than the story we tell. Elena knows this. David knows this. Alex knows this. And you know this too. You know that you are more than you show. You know that you have thoughts you would never speak aloud, desires you would never admit, capacities for both kindness and cruelty that you carefully regulate, depending on circumstance. This is not a confession of evil. This is a recognition of humanity. We are not simple creatures. We are not purely good or purely bad. We are strategic, adaptive, complex beings trying to survive and thrive in systems that require constant negotiation. Let us go deeper now, into the mechanics of manipulation. Not the cruel kind, not the predatory kind, but the everyday kind that we all engage in. The kind that is so normalized that we do not even recognize it as manipulation. When you compliment someone because you genuinely appreciate them, that is authentic. When you compliment someone because you want them to like you, that is strategic. When you compliment someone because you genuinely appreciate them and also want them to like you, that is both. And this is where most of our interactions live, in this ambiguous space where multiple motivations coexist. Elena compliments her manager's presentation. She means it. The presentation was well delivered. But she also knows that the compliment serves a strategic purpose. It rebuilds rapport after their earlier tension. It positions her as a team player. It makes future confrontations less likely because she has established a pattern of support. Is this manipulation? By strict definition, yes. She is influencing his perception of her through calculated behavior. But it is also just social intelligence. It is understanding that relationships require maintenance, that goodwill must be cultivated, that people respond better to those who make them feel valued. Machiavelli understood that the line between leadership and manipulation is often just a matter of perspective. A leader who inspires loyalty through strategic communication is celebrated. A person who builds relationships through strategic communication is called manipulative. The behavior is the same. The judgment depends on whether we approve of the goal. This is why discussions of manipulation are so fraught. We want to believe that there is a clear line between authentic connection and strategic behavior. But in reality, most of our interactions contain elements of both. We are simultaneously genuine and strategic, authentic and performative, honest and edited. David sits in his car before going into his house. He does this every day. Takes 5 minutes to transition from work self to home self. He thinks about the day, processes his frustrations, and then consciously sets them aside. He does not want to bring work stress into his home. This is considerate, but it is also strategic. He knows that his mood affects the entire household, that his wife responds to his energy, that his children mirror his emotional state. So he performs calm. He walks in with a smile. He asks about everyone's day. He is present and engaged, even though part of him is still thinking about the meeting that went poorly, the deadline that is looming, the colleague who undermined him. He is being a good husband and father, but he is also managing perceptions, controlling the emotional climate, strategically presenting a version of himself that serves the collective good. Is this dishonest? Jennifer would say no. She appreciates that David does not dump his work stress on the family. She does the same thing, takes a moment to transition, to set aside her own frustrations before engaging with her family. They are both performing, and they both know it, and they both appreciate it. The performance is an act of love, but there are costs. David sometimes feels that no one really knows him. His co-workers see work David. His family sees home David. His friends see social David. And the person he is when he is alone, the person who sits in the car for 5 minutes processing his actual feelings, that person is seen by no one. This is the existential loneliness of the masked life. We are surrounded by people, engaged in constant interaction, and yet fundamentally alone because no one sees the whole truth of who we are. We have become so skilled at strategic presentation that we have lost the ability to be fully known. Or perhaps we never had that ability. Perhaps the fantasy of being fully known is itself a mask, a story we tell ourselves to make the isolation bearable. Perhaps we are always, inevitably, alone in our own consciousness, and the best we can hope for is to find people who see enough of us to make the connection feel real. Jung wrote about the persona, the mask we wear in public. He distinguished it from the shadow, the parts we hide. But he also wrote about the self, the integrated whole that contains both persona and shadow, both the parts we show and the parts we hide. The journey toward selfhood, toward individuation, requires acknowledging all of it, not just the good parts, not just the parts that are socially acceptable, all of it. But this is terrifying, because if we acknowledge our capacity for cruelty, for selfishness, for manipulation, we risk being rejected. We risk losing the relationships that make life bearable. We risk being seen as the villains in our own stories. So we compromise. We acknowledge our shadows privately. We work on them in therapy, in journals, in long conversations with trusted friends. But we do not broadcast them. We do not post about them on social media. We do not bring them to work or to family dinners. We keep them contained, managed, under control. Alex posts a video about his journey with anxiety. He talks about the panic attacks, the sleepless nights, the feeling of drowning in his own mind. The video goes viral. People comment about how brave he is, how much they relate, how his honesty has helped them feel less alone. And Alex feels good about this. He has helped people. He has created connection through vulnerability. But he does not post about the part of him that enjoys the attention. He does not post about the strategic calculations he made about when to post a video, how to frame it, what thumbnail would get the most clicks. He does not post about the fact that he checked the view count 17 times in the first hour. He does not post about the small, dark part of him that was disappointed when a friend's video got more engagement than his. These thoughts make him feel guilty. They seem to contradict the authentic vulnerability he is trying to embody. But they are also just human. They are the complex reality of being a person who who wants both genuine connection and external validation, who wants to help others and also to be recognized for helping others. Machiavelli would tell Alex that there's no contradiction. He would say that humans are motivated by multiple desires simultaneously, and that acknowledging this is not cynicism but realism. We can genuinely want to help people and also want recognition for helping people. We can be authentically vulnerable and also strategically aware of how that vulnerability is perceived. These things coexist, but our culture demands purity of motive. We want our heroes to be purely heroic, our villains to be purely villainous. We want clear categories, simple stories, easy judgments. The reality of human complexity makes us uncomfortable. So we simplify. We edit. We perform. Elena has a moment of crisis on a Tuesday afternoon. She is sitting at her desk, responding to emails, and suddenly she is overwhelmed by the absurdity of it all. The performance, the strategy, the constant calculation. She thinks about quitting. She thinks about walking out, finding a job where she can just be herself, whatever that means. But then she thinks about her daughter, about the mortgage, about the health insurance, about the fact that every job requires performance, that there's no magical workplace where authenticity is rewarded and strategy is unnecessary. She thinks about Sarah, who tried to be authentic and is now stuck in the same position she was in 5 years ago, passed over and undervalued. So Elena takes a breath. She finishes her emails. She goes to the bathroom and looks at herself in the mirror, and she sees the mask settling back into place. And she feels something that is both resignation and determination. This is her life. This is the game she has chosen to play. And she will play it well, because the alternative is to lose, and she cannot afford to lose. This is the moment that Machiavelli wrote about, though he never named it explicitly. The moment when you consciously choose strategy over authenticity. The moment when you acknowledge that the world is not fair, that goodness is not enough, that survival requires calculation. It is not a happy moment, but it is a clarifying one. David has his own version of this moment. It happens during an argument with Jennifer. They are fighting about something small, something that is really about something much larger. And in the middle of the argument, David realizes that he could end it right now. He could say the thing that would make Jennifer feel heard, that would de-escalate the tension, that would restore peace. But he does not want to. In this moment, he wants to win. He wants to be right. He wants Jennifer to acknowledge that he has a point, that his perspective is valid, that he is not always the problem. So he does not say the de-escalating thing. He says the thing that will make his point, even though he knows it will extend the argument. This is a small cruelty, a strategic choice to prioritize being right over being kind. And David knows it even as he does it. He watches himself make the choice, watches the hurt flash across Jennifer's face, watches the argument escalate. And part of him regrets it immediately, but another part of him feels satisfied. He has asserted himself. He has refused to always be the one who backs down. Later, after they have both cooled off, David will apologize. He will use the language of therapy, of emotional intelligence. He will say, "I was feeling defensive and I reacted poorly." He will rebuild the connection, but he will not tell Jennifer about that moment of conscious choice, that moment when he chose to hurt her to make his point. That stays in the dark room. This is the shadow that Jung wrote about. Not just the parts of ourselves that we hide from others, but the parts we hide from ourselves. The moments when we are not the person we want to be, when we act from pettiness or spite or the desire to win at someone else's expense. We all have these moments. We all make these choices, but we rarely acknowledge them, even to ourselves, because acknowledging them would require admitting that we are not purely good, that we are capable of cruelty, that we sometimes choose our own satisfaction over someone else's well-being. And this admission feels dangerous. It feels like it might unravel the story we tell about who we are. But Machiavelli would say that this story is the problem. The story of our own goodness, our own purity, our own noble intentions. This story makes us blind to our own capacity for harm. It makes us dangerous because we do not see ourselves clearly. The person who knows they are capable of cruelty can choose not to be cruel. The person who believes they are incapable of cruelty will commit cruelties and call them something else. Elena knows she is capable of cruelty. She has seen it in herself. There was a time when a new employee, young and eager and talented, started getting attention that Elena used to receive. And Elena felt something dark and ugly rise up in her. Jealousy, resentment, the desire to diminish this person, to find flaws, to undermine. She did not act on these feelings. Or rather, she acted on them in small, deniable ways. A comment that could be interpreted as constructive criticism but carried an edge. A failure to include the new employee in certain conversations. A subtle distancing that sent a message without saying anything explicit. Elena is not proud of this, but she also does not entirely regret it, because the new employee learned to be more cautious, more aware of office dynamics. And Elena maintained her position. The cruelty served a purpose. It was strategic. It was Machiavellian. And this is what makes Machiavelli so disturbing. Not that he advocated for cruelty, but that he recognized that cruelty is sometimes effective, that the world rewards strategic behavior, even when that behavior causes harm. That being good is not enough if you want to survive in systems built on competition and power. We want to believe that goodness is its own reward, that karma exists, that the universe has a moral arc that bends toward justice. But Machiavelli looked at the world as it actually is and saw something different. He saw that the good often suffer while the strategic thrive. He saw that power goes to those who understand how to acquire and maintain it, not to those who deserve it by some moral standard. This is a bitter truth. It is the truth that keeps us awake at night. It is the truth that makes us question whether our efforts to be good people matter at all. Because if the world does not reward goodness, if strategy and performance are what actually determine outcomes, then what is the point of trying to be authentic, to be kind, to be honest? The answer, perhaps, is that we do not have to choose. We can be both strategic and authentic. We can wear masks and also know ourselves. We can play the game and also maintain our integrity. This is the integration that Jung wrote about. Not choosing between persona and shadow, but acknowledging both. Not pretending we are purely good, but also not surrendering to pure strategy. Elena finds a way to do this. She continues to play the office game, to be strategic and careful and politically aware. But she also finds spaces where she can be more fully herself. She has a friend from college who knows her history, who remembers who she was before she learned to perform. They meet for coffee once a month, and Elena lets her mask slip. She talks about her frustrations, her fears, her moments of pettiness and jealousy. And her friend listens without judgment because she has her own masks, her own dark rooms. This friendship is a lifeline. It is the place where Elena can acknowledge her complexity without fear of consequences. It is the place where she can be both the strategic professional and the flawed human. It is the place where she can integrate her personas and her shadow, at least partially, at least temporarily. David finds his version of this with an old friend named Tom. They play basketball once a week, and afterward they sit in the parking lot and talk. These conversations are different from the ones David has with Jennifer, with his co-workers, with his children. They are more honest, more raw. David tells Tom about the moments when he resents his family, when he feels trapped by his responsibilities, when he wonders what his life would have been like if he had made different choices. Tom does not judge him. Tom has his own resentments, his own moments of wondering. They give each other permission to be complicated, to be less than perfect, to acknowledge the gap between who they are and who they are supposed to be. This does not solve anything. David still goes home and performs being a good husband and father, but the performance feels less suffocating because he has a place where he can acknowledge that it is a performance. Alex finds his version of this in therapy. He pays someone to listen to the parts of himself that he cannot post online. The vanity, the insecurity, the strategic calculations behind his authenticity. His therapist helps him understand that these things do not make him a fraud. They make him human. They make him someone who is trying to navigate the impossible task of being both genuine and successful in a world that often rewards performance over authenticity. These spaces of honesty are crucial. They are the pressure valves that keep us from exploding under the weight of constant performance. They are the places where we can acknowledge our shadows without being destroyed by them. They are the places where we can be known, at least partially, at least by someone. But they are also limited. because even in these spaces, we edit. We choose what to reveal and what to keep hidden. We perform honesty, selecting the truths that feel safe to share while keeping the most shameful parts locked away. There is no space where we are completely unmasked, completely known. Perhaps such a space is impossible. Perhaps we are always, to some degree, performing. Machiavelli wrote The Prince as a guide for rulers, but it is really a guide for anyone who wants to understand power. And power is not just about politics or business. Power is about every relationship, every interaction, every moment when we must decide how to present ourselves to achieve a desired outcome. When you decide what to wear to an event, you are making a power decision. You are choosing how you want to be perceived, what message you want to send about who you are and where you belong. When you decide what to say in a difficult conversation, you are making a power decision. You are choosing between honesty and strategy, between expressing your true feelings and managing the other person's response. We are all Machiavellian, whether we admit it or not. We all make strategic choices about how to present ourselves. We all wear masks. We all have dark rooms where our true selves sit, watching our performances and calculating the costs. The question is not whether we do this. The question is whether we acknowledge that we do this. Because acknowledgement is the first step toward integration. If we pretend that we are always authentic, always honest, always acting from pure motives, then we cannot see ourselves clearly. We cannot make conscious choices about when to perform and when to be genuine. We cannot integrate our personas and our shadows. But if we acknowledge that we are strategic, that we perform, that we wear masks, then we can start to make conscious choices. We can decide when the mask is necessary and when it is not. We can choose which parts of ourselves to reveal and which to protect. We can be intentional about our performances rather than unconscious. This is the wisdom that Machiavelli offers, stripped of its historical context and applied to everyday life. Not that we should be cruel or ruthless, but that we should be clear-eyed about how the world actually works. That we should understand power so that we can navigate it effectively. That we should acknowledge our capacity for strategy so that we can use it consciously rather than being used by it. Elena has learned this. She knows she is performing. She knows she is strategic. And this knowledge gives her power because she can choose her performances rather than being unconsciously driven by them. She can decide when to be vulnerable and when to be guarded. She can decide when to fight and when to let things go. She can decide who gets to see behind her mask and who only sees the performance. This does not make her life easy, but it makes it navigable. It gives her a sense of agency in systems that often feel overwhelming and arbitrary. It allows her to be both strategic and authentic, both protected and connected, both masked and known. David has learned this too, though he came to it more slowly. For years, he believed that his performances were failures, that the gap between his public self and his private self was a sign of weakness or dishonesty. But he has come to understand that the gap is inevitable, that everyone has it, that the question is not whether you perform but how consciously you do it. Now, when he performs calm for his family, he does it knowingly. He does it as a choice, not as an unconscious habit. And this makes it feel less like a betrayal of his authentic self and more like an act of care. He is choosing to manage his own emotions so that they do not become everyone else's problem. He is choosing to create a stable emotional environment for his children. This is not dishonesty. This is responsibility. Alex is still learning this. He is younger, still figuring out who he is beneath all the performances. But he is starting to understand that the question of authenticity is more complex than he thought. That being authentic does not mean sharing everything, performing nothing. It means being intentional about what you share and what you keep private. It means understanding that you are always, to some degree, curating your presentation, and that this is not a failure but a necessity. He is learning to be gentler with himself about the strategic aspects of his online presence. Yes, he thinks about engagement. Yes, he curates his vulnerability. But he also genuinely wants to help people. He also genuinely struggles with anxiety. The strategic and the authentic coexist, and that is okay. That is human. Let us consider now the people who refuse to play the game. The people who insist on complete authenticity, who refuse to perform, who say exactly what they think and feel without strategic consideration. We admire these people in theory. We call them brave, honest, real. But we also keep them at a distance, because their refusal to perform makes us uncomfortable. It reminds us of our own performances. It challenges the social contract that we have all agreed to, the contract that says we will edit ourselves for the comfort and convenience of others. Sarah, Elena's colleague who believes in bringing her whole self to work, is one of these people. And Elena both admires and pities her. Admires her courage, pities her naivety, because Sarah has not learned what Elena knows, that the world punishes unstrategic authenticity, that being real is not enough if you want to advance, to be heard, to have influence. But perhaps Sarah knows something that Elena has forgotten. Perhaps there is value in refusing to play the game, even if it costs you. Perhaps there is integrity in being consistently yourself, even if that self is not always strategic or polished or appropriate. Perhaps the cost of constant performance is higher than the cost of occasional authenticity. This is the tension that we all navigate. The tension between protecting ourselves through performance and connecting with others through authenticity. The tension between advancing in systems that reward strategy and maintaining integrity that requires honesty. The tension between the person we are and the person we need to be to survive. There's no easy answer. Machiavelli would say that survival requires strategy, that the world is not kind to those who refuse to play the game. Jung would say that wholeness requires integration, that we cannot be healthy if we are constantly split between our public and private selves. Both are right. Both are incomplete. The truth is that we must find our own balance. We must decide for ourselves when to perform and when to be authentic. We must choose which masks to wear and when to take them off. We must navigate the complex terrain of human relationships with both strategy and heart, both calculation and genuine feeling. Elena makes her choices. David makes his. Alex makes his. Sarah makes hers. And you make yours. Every day, in 1,000 small moments, you decide how much of yourself to reveal and how much to protect. You decide when to be strategic and when to be genuine. You decide which version of yourself to present to the world. These are not easy decisions. They require constant calibration, constant awareness, constant negotiation between competing values and desires. They require acknowledging that you are complex, that you contain multitudes, that you are capable of both authenticity and performance, both kindness and cruelty, both selflessness and strategy. This acknowledgement is uncomfortable. It is easier to believe that we are simply good people, that our motives are pure, that we are always authentic. But this belief is itself a mask, a performance of innocence that protects us from the complexity of our own nature. Machiavelli strips away this mask. He forces us to look at ourselves clearly, to acknowledge our capacity for strategy and manipulation, to recognize that we are all players in games of power, whether we admit it or not. This is not a comfortable truth, but it is a liberating one, because once we acknowledge what we are doing, we can choose to do it consciously. We can choose to be strategic in service of values we believe in rather than being unconsciously driven by fear or ambition. Jung offers a complementary truth. He tells us that acknowledging our shadows, our capacity for darkness, is not the end of the journey, but the beginning. That integration is possible, that we can be whole even while being complex, that we can acknowledge our performances without being consumed by them. Together, these perspectives offer a path forward, not a path of pure authenticity, which is impossible in a world that requires performance, not a path of pure strategy, which is soul-destroying, but a path of conscious navigation, of intentional choice, of integration between our public and private selves. This path requires honesty with ourselves, even if we cannot always be honest with others. It requires acknowledging our masks, while also knowing what lies beneath them. It requires being strategic without losing sight of our values. It requires performing without forgetting that we are performing. Elena sits at her desk on a Friday afternoon, and she feels tired. Not physically tired, though she is at too. Emotionally tired. Tired of performing, of calculating, of managing perceptions. She thinks about the weekend ahead, about the brief respite from office politics. But she also knows that she will be performing at home too. just different performances for a different audience. She thinks about her daughter, who is 7 years old and still believes that people are simply who they appear to be. Her daughter has not yet learned about masks, about the gap between public and private selves. She trusts easily, loves openly, expresses her feelings without strategic consideration. And Elena wants to protect this innocence for as long as possible. But she also knows that eventually, her daughter will learn what she has learned, that the world requires performance, that survival requires strategy, that authenticity is a luxury that must be carefully rationed. This thought makes Elena sad. She does not want her daughter to become like her, constantly calculating, constantly performing. But she also does not want her daughter to be like Sarah, authentic and undervalued. She wants something different for her daughter, something that she herself has not achieved. She wants her daughter to be both strategic and authentic, both protected and connected, both successful and whole. But she does not know how to teach this. She does not know how to pass on the wisdom of strategic living without also passing on the exhaustion of constant performance. She does not know how to help her daughter navigate a world that rewards masks without losing sight of who she is beneath them. This is the dilemma of every parent, every mentor, every person who cares about someone younger and less experienced. We want to prepare them for the world as it is, but we also want to protect them from becoming too hardened, too cynical, too strategic. We want them to be realistic without losing their idealism. We want them to be protected without losing their capacity for genuine connection. David faces this same dilemma with his children. His son is 15, starting to navigate the complex social dynamics of high school. David watches him learn to perform, to edit himself, to present different versions of himself to different groups. And David recognizes this behavior because it is what he does every day. But seeing it in his son makes him question whether this is really the best way to live. He wants to tell his son that it is okay to be himself, that authenticity is valuable, that he does not need to perform. But he also knows that this advice is incomplete, because the world does require performance. High school requires it, college will require it, the workplace will require it, relationships will require it. And if his son does not learn to navigate these requirements, he will struggle. So David tries to find a middle path. He tells his son that it is okay to present different versions of himself in different contexts, but that he should always know who he is beneath the performances. He tells him that strategy is necessary, but that it should serve his values rather than replace them. He tells him that masks are tools, not identities. He does not know if his son understands this. He does not know if he understands it himself, but he is trying to pass on something more nuanced than either pure authenticity or pure strategy. He is trying to pass on the wisdom of conscious navigation, of intentional choice, of integration. Alex does not have children, but he thinks about his influence on his audience. He has thousands of followers, many of them young people who look to him for guidance on mental health, on authenticity, on how to live in a world that often feels overwhelming. And he feels the weight of this responsibility, because he knows that he is performing, that his authenticity is curated, that he is strategic about what he shares. But his audience does not know this. They see his vulnerability and think it is complete honesty. They see his openness and think it is unedited truth. Should he tell them? Should he post about the strategic aspects of his authenticity, about the calculations behind his vulnerability? He thinks about this often. On one hand, it would be more honest. It would help his audience understand that authenticity on social media is always, to some degree, performed. On the other hand, it might destroy the connection he has built. It might make people feel manipulated, even though his intentions are good. This is the paradox of performed authenticity. If you acknowledge that it is performed, it loses its power. But if you do not acknowledge it, you are being dishonest. There is no way to win. There is only the constant navigation between these two poles, the constant calibration of how much to reveal and how much to protect. Alex decides, for now, to keep his strategic awareness private. He will continue to share his struggles, to be vulnerable, to help people feel less alone. But he will not share the mechanics of how he does this. He will not pull back the curtain on his own performance. Perhaps this is dishonest. Or perhaps it is simply understanding that some truths are not helpful, that some revelations create more problems than they solve. Machiavelli would understand this choice. He wrote that a prince must appear to have certain virtues, even if he does not actually possess them. Not because deception is good, but because appearance matters. Because people respond to what they perceive, not to what is actually true. And while Alex is not a prince, he is someone with influence, someone whose appearance matters, someone whose performances have real effects on real people. This does not make Alex a villain. It makes him someone who understands the gap between intention and perception, between what is true and what is useful. It makes him someone who has learned that navigating the world requires both authenticity and strategy, both honesty and discretion. Let us return now to the central question that haunts all of these characters, that haunts all of us. If we are always performing, if we are always strategic, if we are always wearing masks, then who are we really? Is there a true self beneath all the performances? Or are we nothing more than the sum of our masks? Jung would say that the self exists, but it is not simple. It is not the person you are at work, or the person you are at home, or the person you are with friends. It is all of these and more. It is the totality of your experiences, your capacities, your contradictions. The self is not found by stripping away all the masks. It is found by acknowledging all the masks and understanding why you wear them. This is a more complex understanding of authenticity than the one our culture usually offers. We are told to be ourselves, as if there is a single, stable self that we can simply express. But the reality is that we are multiple, contextual, constantly adapting. The person you are is not fixed. It changes based on circumstance, on audience, on what is required of you in any given moment. This does not mean that authenticity is impossible. It means that authenticity is not about being the same person in every context. It is about being conscious of your adaptations, about choosing your performances rather than being unconsciously driven by them, about maintaining some core values or sense of self that persists across contexts even as your behavior changes. Elena has core values. She values competence, loyalty, protection of those she loves. These values persist whether she is at work or at home, whether she is performing confidence or vulnerability. The performances change, but the values remain. This is her authenticity, not a fixed personality, but a consistent set of principles that guide her choices. David has core values too. He values responsibility, stability, care for his family. These values shape his performances even as the performances themselves vary. When he performs calm for his family, he is acting from his value of care. When he performs competence at work, he is acting from his value of responsibility. The performances are strategic, but they are not arbitrary. They are expressions of who he is, filtered through the requirements of different contexts. Alex has core values. He values connection, honesty, helping others. These values guide his content creation even as he makes strategic choices about what to share and how to share it. His performances are not betrayals of his values. They are attempts to express his values in ways that will actually reach people, that will actually make a difference. This is the integration that Jung wrote about. Not eliminating the masks, but understanding them. Not choosing between authenticity and strategy, but finding ways to be strategic in service of authentic values. Not pretending that we are simple, but acknowledging our complexity and finding coherence within it. But this integration is hard work. It requires constant self-reflection, constant honesty with ourselves even when we cannot be honest with others. It requires acknowledging our shadows, our capacity for manipulation and cruelty, without being consumed by guilt or shame. It requires accepting that we are both good and strategic, both authentic and performative, both connected and alone. Most people do not do this work. Most people maintain their illusions, their stories of their own goodness and authenticity. They perform without acknowledging that they are performing. They manipulate without calling it manipulation. They wear masks without admitting that they are masks. And this unconsciousness makes them dangerous, both to others and to themselves. Because when you do not acknowledge your own capacity for strategy and manipulation, you cannot control it. It controls you. You act from unconscious patterns, from unexamined fears and desires, from conditioning that you have never questioned. You become a puppet of your own defenses, performing roles that you did not consciously choose. But when you acknowledge your performances, when you see your masks clearly, you gain the power to choose. You can decide when to perform and when to be more genuine. You can decide which masks serve you and which ones have become prisons. You can decide who you want to be rather than simply being who you have always been. This is the promise of self-awareness, of shadow work, of Jungian integration. Not that you will become purely authentic or purely good, but that you will become conscious. And consciousness is power. It is the power to choose, to adapt, to navigate the complex terrain of human relationships with both strategy and integrity. Elena has this power, at least partially. She knows she is performing. She knows she is strategic. And this knowledge allows her to make choices rather than simply reacting. When her manager takes credit for her work, she chooses her response rather than being driven by unconscious anger. When she feels jealous of a colleague, she acknowledges the feeling rather than acting on it unconsciously. She is not perfect, but she is conscious. David has this power too. He knows he is performing calm for his family. He knows he is managing his emotions strategically. And this knowledge allows him to do it intentionally, as an act of care rather than as an unconscious defense. He is not suppressing his feelings. He is choosing when and how to express them. This is not dishonesty. This is emotional intelligence. Alex is developing this power. He is learning to see his own strategic behavior without judging it as inauthentic. He is learning that consciousness and performance can coexist, that you can be both strategic and genuine. He is learning that the question is not whether you perform, but whether you perform consciously, in service of values you have chosen rather than patterns you have inherited. This is the wisdom that Machiavelli and Jung offer when read together. Machiavelli tells us to see the world clearly, to acknowledge power and strategy and the gap between how things should be and how they are. Jung tells us to see ourselves clearly, to acknowledge our shadows and our masks and the complexity of our own nature. Together, they offer a path of conscious navigation, of strategic authenticity, of integrated complexity. But this path is not easy. It requires constant work, constant honesty, constant willingness to see things that are uncomfortable. It requires acknowledging that you are not the hero of your own story, or at least, not only the hero. You are also the villain sometimes. You are also the manipulator, the strategist, the person who chooses their own interests over someone else's well-being. This acknowledgement is painful. It challenges the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. It forces us to see our own capacity for harm, our own participation in systems of power and manipulation. It makes us complicit in things we would rather believe we are innocent of. But it also makes us more honest, more real, more capable of genuine connection, because we are not hiding behind illusions of our own goodness. When we acknowledge our shadows, we can meet others in their shadows. When we acknowledge our masks, we can see through others' masks. When we acknowledge our strategic behavior, we can recognize it in others without judgment. This is the paradox. Acknowledging that we are all performing, all strategic, all wearing masks, does not destroy connection. It deepens it. Because real connection is not about being perfectly authentic. It is about being honestly complex. It is about acknowledging that we are all navigating the same impossible terrain, all trying to balance authenticity and strategy, all wearing masks that we sometimes forget we are wearing. Elena and her friend from college have this kind of connection. They can acknowledge their performances to each other because they both understand that performance is necessary. They can share their shadows because they both know that shadows are universal. They can be honest about their strategic behavior because they both recognize that strategy is survival. David and Tom have this kind of connection. They can admit their resentments, their moments of cruelty, their failures to be the people they want to be. And this honesty does not destroy their friendship. It strengthens it, because they are not performing for each other. They are being honestly complex, acknowledging their contradictions, meeting each other in the messy reality of being human. Alex is still looking for this kind of connection. He has his therapist, which helps. But he wants friends who understand the complexity of his position, who can acknowledge their own performances without judgment. He wants to find people who are doing the same work he is doing, the work of conscious navigation, of strategic authenticity, of integration. This kind of connection is rare, because it requires both people to have done the work of self-awareness, to have acknowledged their own shadows and masks. Most people are not there. Most people are still maintaining their illusions, still performing unconsciously, still believing their own stories of authenticity and goodness. But when you find it, this kind of connection is transformative. It is the antidote to the loneliness of the masked life. It is the proof that you can be known, at least partially, at least by someone. It is the evidence that consciousness and connection can coexist, that you do not have to choose between protecting yourself and being real. This is what we are all searching for, beneath all the performances and strategies. We are searching for someone who can see us clearly and not turn away. Someone who can acknowledge our complexity and not demand that we simplify. Someone who can meet us in our shadows and not insist that we stay in the light. Machiavelli never wrote about this. His focus was on power, on strategy, on survival in a hostile world. But perhaps he understood it anyway. Perhaps his clear-eyed view of human nature, his refusal to pretend that people are better than they are, was itself a kind of honesty. Perhaps he was offering a different kind of connection, one based not on shared illusions, but on shared reality. Jung wrote about this explicitly. He wrote about the importance of finding people who can witness your wholeness, who can see both your light and your shadow. He wrote about the therapeutic relationship as a space where this witnessing can happen. But he also wrote about the possibility of finding this in friendship, in partnership, in any relationship where both people are willing to be honestly complex. This is the goal, then, not to eliminate our masks, but to find people who can see beneath them, not to stop performing, but to find spaces where we can acknowledge that we are performing, not to become purely authentic, but to become consciously strategic, intentionally complex, honestly contradictory. Elena is working toward this. She has her friend from college, and she is slowly building other connections where she can be more fully herself. She is learning to distinguish between relationships that require full performance and relationships where she can let her mask slip. She is learning to protect herself without isolating herself, to be strategic without losing her capacity for genuine connection. David is working toward this too. He has Tom, and he is trying to build more honesty into his marriage. He is learning to share more of his internal experience with Jennifer, to let her see some of what happens in that dark room. It is scary. It risks changing the dynamic they have built over 18 years, but it also offers the possibility of deeper connection, of being more fully known. Alex is at the beginning of this journey. He is still figuring out who he is beneath his performances, but he is asking the right questions. He is acknowledging his strategic behavior rather than denying it. He is looking for connections that can hold his complexity. He is doing the work. This is all any of us can do. Acknowledge our masks. Understand our strategies. Integrate our shadows. Find people who can witness our complexity. Navigate the impossible terrain of being human with as much consciousness as we can muster. It is not a perfect solution. There is no perfect solution. We will always be performing, always strategic, always wearing masks. The world requires it. Survival requires it. But we can do it consciously. We can choose our performances rather than being driven by them. We can maintain some core of self that persists across contexts. We can find moments and relationships where we can be more fully known. This is the wisdom that emerges from reading Machiavelli and Jung together, from understanding both the external requirements of strategic living and the internal requirements of psychological wholeness. We must be strategic to survive in the world as it is. We must be conscious to survive in our own minds. We must find ways to be both, to navigate between these requirements, to integrate what seems like contradiction. Elena sits at her desk, and the day is ending. She has performed well. She has navigated office politics successfully. She has protected her position and advanced her interests. And she has also been genuinely helpful to a colleague who needed support. She has been both strategic and kind, both masked and real. This is her integration, imperfect but honest. David sits in his car before going into his house. He takes his 5 minutes to transition. But tonight, he does it differently. Instead of just setting aside his work stress, he acknowledges it. He names it. He decides that he will share some of it with Jennifer, not all of it, but enough to let her see him more clearly. This is his integration, imperfect but intentional. Alex sits at his computer, editing his latest video. He is making strategic choices about what to include and what to cut. But he is also being genuinely vulnerable, sharing real struggles, trying to help people. He is both performing and authentic, both strategic and honest. This is his integration, imperfect but evolving. These are small moments, small choices, small steps toward consciousness, toward integration, toward being both strategic and whole. They are not dramatic. They will not change the world, but they change the people making them. They make life more navigable, more honest, more bearable. This is what Machiavelli would tell you about your timeline, about the carefully curated lives you see on social media, about the performances that surround you. He would tell you that everyone is strategic, everyone is performing, everyone is wearing masks. And this is not a failure. This is adaptation. This is survival. But Jung would add something crucial. He would tell you that acknowledging the masks is not enough. You must also know what is beneath them. You must integrate your shadow, acknowledge your complexity, find ways to be whole even while being strategic. You must find people who can witness your wholeness, spaces where you can be honestly contradictory, moments where you can let the mask slip. Together, these perspectives offer a way forward, not a way out of the theater, because there's no way out. We are always on stage, always performing, always navigating the gap between who we are and who we need to be. But we can be conscious performers. We can choose our roles. We can find moments of genuine connection within the performance. We can be both strategic and whole. This is the journey. This is the work. This is what it means to live consciously in a world that requires performance. It is not easy. It is not comfortable, but it is honest. And honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, is better than the alternative, better than unconscious performance, better than unexamined strategy, better than masks that we forget we are wearing. Elena knows this. David knows this. Alex is learning this. And now you know this too. You know that the faces on your timeline are masks. You know that the authenticity you see is performed. You know that everyone is strategic. Everyone is navigating power. Everyone is trying to survive in systems that reward performance over truth. But you also know that this does not make connection impossible. It makes it more complex, more intentional, more precious. Because when you find someone who can see beneath your mask, who can witness your shadow, who can hold your complexity without demanding that you simplify, that is real. That is worth protecting. That is worth the work of consciousness. The theater continues. The performances go on. The masks remain necessary. But you are no longer unconscious. You are no longer a puppet of your own defenses. You are a conscious performer, choosing your roles, navigating your relationships, integrating your contradictions. This is power, not the power to control others, though that may come, but the power to control yourself, the power to choose, the power to be both strategic and authentic, both protected and connected, both masked and known. Machiavelli would approve. Jung would approve. And perhaps, most importantly, you can approve of yourself, not because you are perfect, not because you are purely authentic, not because you have eliminated your shadows or your strategies, but because you are conscious, because you are doing the work, because you are navigating the impossible terrain of being human with as much honesty and intention as you can muster. The curtain does not fall. There is no final act. The theater of human behavior continues, inside each of us, in every interaction, in every choice about how to present ourselves to the world. But you are no longer just an actor. You are also the director. You are also the audience. You are watching yourself perform, and you are choosing your performances, and you are finding moments where the performance can pause and something more real can emerge. This is the wisdom. This is the integration. This is what it means to live under the mask, while also knowing what the mask conceals. It is not a solution. It is a practice, a daily practice of consciousness, of choice, of honest complexity. Elena will wake up tomorrow and put on her mask again, but she will know she is doing it. She will choose it. And in that choice, there is freedom. Not freedom from the mask, but freedom within it. Freedom to be strategic without losing herself. freedom to perform without forgetting who she is beneath the performance. David will perform calm for his family again, but he will also share more of his internal experience. He will find ways to be both protective and honest, both strategic and vulnerable. He will navigate the tension between these requirements with more consciousness, more intention, more choice. Alex will continue to curate his authenticity, but he will do it with less guilt, less sense of being a fraud. He will understand that strategic authenticity is not a contradiction. It is a necessity. It is how you express genuine values in a world that requires performance. It is how you help people while also protecting yourself. And you will continue to navigate your own theater, your own performances, your own masks. But you will do it differently now. You will see the masks on others and recognize them for what they are. You will see the performances on your timeline and understand strategy behind them. You will see the gap between appearance and reality and not be fooled by it. More importantly, you will see your own masks. You will acknowledge your own performances. You will integrate your own shadows. And in that seeing, in that acknowledging, in that integrating, you will find power. The power to choose. The power to navigate. The power to be both strategic and whole. This is what Machiavelli would tell you about your timeline. This is what Jung would tell you about your psyche. This is what the theater of human behavior reveals when you watch it closely enough, honestly enough, consciously enough. We are all performers. We are all strategic. We are all wearing masks. And this is not a tragedy. This is not a failure. This is not evidence that human connection is impossible or that authenticity is dead. This is simply the reality of being human in a complex world. The question is not whether we perform. The question is whether we perform consciously, whether we choose our masks, whether we know what lies beneath them. You know now. You have seen behind the curtain. You have acknowledged the theater. You cannot unknow this. You cannot go back to unconscious performance, to unexamined strategy, to masks that you forget you are wearing. The knowledge has changed you. You are different now, more conscious, more intentional, more free. This is the gift and the burden of awareness. You see more clearly, but you cannot unsee. You understand more deeply, but you cannot unknow. You are more powerful, but you are also more responsible. Because consciousness requires choice, and choice requires taking responsibility for your performances, your strategies, your masks. Elena takes this responsibility. She owns her strategic behavior. She acknowledges her performances. She does not pretend to be purely authentic or purely good. She is complex, contradictory, both strategic and genuine. And she is learning to be okay with this, learning to integrate it, learning to be whole within her complexity. David takes this responsibility. He owns his emotional management. He acknowledges his performances. He does not pretend that he is always the calm, stable person he presents to his family. He is also frustrated, resentful, uncertain. And he is learning to share this, carefully and intentionally, in ways that deepen connection rather than destabilize it. Alex takes this responsibility. He owns his curated authenticity. He acknowledges his strategic choices. He does not pretend that his online presence is completely unfiltered or unedited. He is both genuine and strategic, both vulnerable and protected. And he is learning to be okay with this, to see it as necessary rather than fraudulent. And you must take this responsibility too. You must own your performances. You must acknowledge your strategies. You must integrate your shadows. You must find ways to be both strategic and authentic, both protected and connected, both masked and known. This is the work. This is the journey. This is what it means to live consciously under the mask. It is not easy. It requires constant vigilance, constant honesty, constant willingness to see things that are uncomfortable. But it is worth it, because the alternative is to live unconsciously, to be driven by patterns you have not examined, to wear masks you do not even know you are wearing. Consciousness is power. Choice is freedom. Integration is wholeness. These are not just abstract concepts. They are practical tools for navigating the complex terrain of human relationships. They are ways of being both strategic and authentic, both protected and connected, both successful and whole. Machiavelli gives you the tools to understand power, to navigate systems, to survive in a world that does not reward pure goodness. Jung gives you the tools to understand yourself, to integrate your shadows, to be whole even while being complex. Together, they give you a map for the journey. Not a simple map, not an easy map, but an honest one. The journey continues. The theater continues. The performances continue. But you are different now. You are conscious. You are choosing. You are integrating. You are navigating the impossible terrain of being human with more awareness, more intention, more honesty. Elena continues her journey. She will face new challenges, new performances, new moments when she must choose between strategy and authenticity. But she will face them consciously. She will make choices rather than being driven by unconscious patterns. She will continue to integrate, to grow, to become more whole within her complexity. David continues his journey. He will face new tensions in his marriage, new moments when he must choose between protection and honesty. But he will face them consciously. He will share more of himself, carefully and intentionally. He will continue to build deeper connection while maintaining necessary boundaries. Alex continues his journey. He will face new questions about authenticity, new moments when he must choose what to share and what to protect. But he will face them consciously. He will continue to be both strategic and genuine, both vulnerable and protected. He will continue to help people while also taking care of himself. And you continue your journey. You will face your own challenges, your own performances, your own moments of choice. But you will face them differently now. You will see your masks. You will acknowledge your strategies. You will integrate your shadows. You will navigate with consciousness, with intention, with honest complexity. This is not the end. This is the beginning of conscious living, of intentional performance, of integrated wholeness, the beginning of seeing clearly, choosing consciously, navigating honestly, the beginning of being both strategic and authentic, both protected and connected, both masked and known. The theater continues. But you are no longer just an actor. You are also the director, the audience, the critic. You are watching yourself perform, and you are choosing your performances, and you are finding moments where something more real can emerge. You are living under the mask, while also knowing what the mask conceals. You are navigating the impossible terrain of being human, with as much consciousness as you can muster. This is the wisdom. This is the integration. This is the journey. And it continues every day, in every interaction, in every choice about how to present yourself to the world. The curtain never falls. The performance never ends. But you are conscious now, and consciousness changes everything. Let us go deeper still, into the mechanisms of self-deception, because this is where the real complexity lies. Not in the masks we show others, but in the masks we show ourselves. The stories we tell about who we are, the narratives we construct to make our choices seem noble, our motivations seem pure, our behaviors seem justified. Elena tells herself that she is strategic because she has to be, because the world requires it, because she has a daughter to support. And this is true, but it is not the whole truth. She is also strategic because she enjoys it, because there is satisfaction in navigating office politics successfully, because winning feels good, even when the game is exhausting. She does not like to acknowledge this. It makes her feel shallow, calculating, less than the person she wants to be. So she focuses on the necessity, on the external requirements, on the ways that her strategic behavior serves her values. And these things are real, but they are also convenient. They allow her to avoid looking at the part of herself that enjoys the manipulation, that takes pleasure in being more skilled at the game than her colleagues. This is the shadow that Jung wrote about, not just the parts of ourselves that we hide from others, but the parts we hide from ourselves, the motivations we do not want to acknowledge, the pleasures we do not want to admit, the aspects of our nature that contradict the stories we tell about who we are. David tells himself that he performs calm for his family because he loves them, because he wants to protect them from his stress. And this is true, but it is not the whole truth. He also performs calm because it gives him control, because managing his emotions gives him a sense of power in a life that often feels out of control, because being the stable one, the reliable one, gives him an identity that he values. He does not like to acknowledge this. It makes his care seem less pure, his love seem less selfless. So he focuses on the protective aspects, on the ways that his emotional management serves his family. And these things are real, but they are also convenient. They allow him to avoid looking at the part of himself that uses emotional control as a form of power, that takes satisfaction in being needed, in being the one who holds everything together. Alex tells himself that he curates his authenticity because he wants to help people, because unfiltered honesty would be overwhelming, because strategic vulnerability is more effective than raw vulnerability. And this is true, but it is not the whole truth. He also curates his authenticity because he wants to be liked, because he wants validation, because the attention feels good, and he has learned how to get more of it. He does not like to acknowledge this. It makes his vulnerability seem less genuine, his help seem less altruistic. So he focuses on the helpful aspects, on the ways that his strategic sharing serve his audience. And these things are real, but they are also convenient. They allow him to avoid looking at the part of himself that is performing for approval, that measures his worth in engagement metrics, that has learned to commodify his pain. This is the deepest level of the mask, not the one we show others, but the one we show ourselves. The story we tell about our own motivations, the narrative that makes us the hero of our own lives, the interpretation that allows us to see our strategic behavior as necessary rather than chosen, our performances as service rather than self-interest. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote about the gap between how princes want to be seen and how they actually are. But he could have written the same thing about all of us. We all want to be seen as good, as authentic, as acting from pure motives. And we all construct narratives that allow us to see ourselves this way, even when our behavior suggests something more complex. The work of integration, then, is not just about acknowledging the masks we show others. It is about acknowledging the masks we show ourselves. It is about looking at our own narratives with the same clear-eyed skepticism that we apply to others. It is about asking not just what we do, but why we do it, and not accepting the first answer, the comfortable answer, the answer that makes us look good. Elena is starting to do this work. She is starting to acknowledge that she enjoys the game, that there is satisfaction in strategic success that goes beyond necessity. This acknowledgement is uncomfortable. It challenges her self-image as someone who is strategic only because she has to be. But it is also liberating, because once she acknowledges this part of herself, she can integrate it. She can own it. She can stop pretending that her strategic behavior is purely selfless and start seeing it as a complex mix of necessity and enjoyment, protection and power. This does not make her a bad person. It makes her an honest person. It makes her someone who can see herself clearly, who can acknowledge her complexity, who can integrate her shadow. And this integration makes her more powerful, not less, because she is no longer fighting against parts of herself. She is no longer using energy to maintain illusions. She can use all of herself, including the parts she used to hide, in service of her goals. David is starting to do this work too. He is starting to acknowledge that his emotional control is not just about protecting his family. It is also about maintaining power, about being needed, about having an identity that feels stable and valuable. This acknowledgement is uncomfortable. It challenges his self-image as someone who is selfless, who sacrifices his own needs for his family. But it is also liberating, because once he acknowledges this part of himself, he can make more conscious choices about when to share his emotions and when to manage them. He can ask himself, am I managing my emotions right now because it serves my family, or because it serves my need for control? And sometimes the answer will be both. And that is okay, because humans are complex. We act from multiple motivations simultaneously. The work is not to have pure motives. The work is to acknowledge our actual motives in all their complexity. Alex is starting to do this work. He is starting to acknowledge that his content creation is not just about helping people. It is also about getting validation, about being seen, about measuring his worth through external metrics. This acknowledgement is uncomfortable. It challenges his self-image as someone who is authentically vulnerable, who shares his struggles purely to help others. But it is also liberating, because once he acknowledges this part of himself, he can make more conscious choices about what to share and why. He can ask himself, Am I sharing this because it will help people, or because I want attention? And sometimes the answer will be both. And that is okay, because wanting to help people and wanting attention are not mutually exclusive. They coexist in most of us. The work is not to eliminate the desire for attention. The work is to acknowledge it, to integrate it, to make conscious choices about how to satisfy it in ways that align with our values. This is the deepest level of Jungian integration. Not just acknowledging the shadow we show others, but acknowledging the shadow we hide from ourselves. Not just seeing our masks, but seeing the masks beneath the masks. Not just understanding that we are strategic, but understanding why we are strategic, what we get from it, what needs it serves beyond the obvious ones. This work is hard. It requires brutal honesty with ourselves. It requires giving up the comfortable narratives that make us the heroes of our own stories. It requires acknowledging that we are not purely good, not purely selfless, not purely authentic. We are complex, contradictory, motivated by multiple desires that sometimes conflict. But this work is also essential, because without it, we remain unconscious. We remain driven by needs we do not acknowledge, motivated by desires we do not admit, performing for reasons we do not understand. And this unconsciousness makes us dangerous, both to others and to ourselves. When Elena acts from unconscious jealousy, she can hurt people without meaning to. When David controls emotions from unconscious need for power, he can stifle genuine connection. When Alex performs from unconscious need for validation, he can lose sight of his actual values. Unconsciousness makes us reactive, driven, less than fully human. But consciousness makes us powerful. When Elena acknowledges her enjoyment of strategic success, she can use it consciously. She can channel it in ways that serve her values. She can enjoy the game while also maintaining her integrity. When David acknowledges his need for control, he can choose when to exercise it and when to let go. He can be stable when his family needs stability and vulnerable when they need connection. When Alex acknowledges his need for validation, he can find healthy ways to satisfy it. He can create content that both helps people and gives him the recognition he craves. This is the promise of shadow integration. Not that we eliminate our darker motivations, but that we acknowledge them and integrate them. Not that we become purely good, but that we become consciously complex. Not that we stop performing, but that we understand why we perform and choose our performances intentionally. Machiavelli would say that this is realism. This is seeing yourself as you actually are, not as you wish to be. This is understanding your own motivations clearly enough to use them effectively. This is the self-knowledge that makes strategic action possible. Jung would say that this is individuation. This is the process of becoming whole, of integrating all parts of yourself, of acknowledging your complexity and finding coherence within it. This is the psychological work that makes authentic living possible. Together, they offer a path of conscious complexity, a path of strategic authenticity, a path of integrated wholeness. It is not an easy path. It requires constant work, constant honesty, constant willingness to see things about yourself that are uncomfortable. But it is the only path that leads to both effectiveness and integrity, both success and wholeness, both strategic competence and authentic connection. Elena walks this path. Some days she does it well. Some days she falls back into unconscious patterns, into comfortable narratives, into masks she forgets she is wearing. But she keeps coming back to the work. She keeps asking herself the hard questions. She keeps acknowledging the parts of herself that are uncomfortable to see. And slowly, gradually, she becomes more integrated, more conscious, more whole. David walks this path. Some days he shares more of himself with Jennifer. Some days he retreats into performance, into emotional control, into the comfortable role of being the stable one. But he keeps coming back to the work. He keeps trying to be more honest, more vulnerable, more real. And slowly, gradually, his marriage deepens. The connection becomes more genuine. The performances become less necessary. Alex walks this path. Some days he creates content that is both helpful and honest about his motivations. Some days he falls into performing for metrics, into chasing validation, into losing sight of his values. But he keeps coming back to the work. He keeps trying to be more conscious about why he shares what he shares. And slowly, gradually, he finds a balance. He learns to satisfy his need for validation in ways that also serve his desire to help people. And you can walk this path too. You can start asking yourself the hard questions. Why do I perform this way? What do I get from this mask? What needs does this strategy serve? And you can refuse to accept the first answer, the comfortable answer, the answer that makes you look good. You can dig deeper. You can acknowledge the parts of yourself that are uncomfortable to see. You can integrate your shadow. This is the work. This is the journey. This is what it means to live consciously in a world that rewards performance. It is not about eliminating performance. It is about understanding it. It is not about being purely authentic. It is about being honestly complex. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. The masks will remain. The performances will continue. The strategic behavior will not disappear. But you will be different. You will be conscious. You will be choosing. You will be integrating. And this consciousness, this choice, this integration will change everything. You will see others differently. You will see their masks and understand them. You will see their performances and recognize them. You will see their strategic behavior and not judge it, because you will recognize it in yourself. You will have more compassion for the complexity of being human, for the impossible task of navigating a world that requires both authenticity and performance. You will see yourself differently. You will see your own masks without shame. You will see your own performances without guilt. You will see your own strategic behavior without judgment. You will acknowledge your complexity. Integrate your shadow. Own your contradictions. You will be more honest with yourself, and this honesty will make you more powerful. You will navigate relationships differently. You will know when you are performing and why. You will choose when to be strategic and when to be vulnerable. You will find people who can witness your complexity, who can see beneath your masks, who can hold your contradictions without demanding that you simplify. And with these people, you will build connections that are both strategic and genuine, both protected and real. This is the wisdom that emerges from the theater of human behavior. This is what Machiavelli would tell you about your timeline, about the performances that surround you, about the masks that everyone wears. This is what Jung would tell you about your psyche, about the shadows you hide, about the work of integration that makes wholeness possible. We are all performers. We are all strategic. We are all wearing masks. And this is not a tragedy. This is not a failure. This is not evidence that human connection is impossible. This is simply the reality of being human. The question is not whether we perform. The question is whether we perform consciously, whether we integrate our shadows, whether we find ways to be both strategic and whole. You know now. You have seen behind the curtain. You have acknowledged the theater. You have started the work of integration. The journey continues. The performances continue. But you are different now. You are conscious. And consciousness changes everything. Elena sits at her desk on a Monday morning. Another week begins. Another round of performances, strategies, masks. But she is not the same person she was a year ago. She is more conscious, more integrated, more whole. She still performs, but she knows she is performing. She still wears masks, but she knows what lies beneath them. She still plays the game, but she plays it consciously, in service of values she has chosen. This does not make her life easy, but it makes it navigable. It makes it honest. It makes it hers. David sits in his car before going into work. He takes a moment to transition, to put on his work mask, but he does it differently now. He acknowledges what he is doing. He chooses it consciously. He knows that he will perform today, and he knows why, and he knows what he gets from it. And this knowledge makes the performance feel less like a betrayal and more like a tool, something he uses rather than something that uses him. This does not make his life easy, but it makes it navigable. It makes it honest. It makes it his. Alex sits at his computer, planning his next video. He thinks about what to share, how to frame it, what will resonate with his audience. He is being strategic, but he is also being genuine. He is acknowledging his need for validation while also honoring his desire to help people. He is integrating his contradictions, owning his complexity, being consciously both strategic and authentic. This does not make his life easy, but it makes it navigable. It makes it honest. It makes it his. And you sit wherever you are, reading these words, thinking about your own masks, your own performances, your own strategic behavior, and you are starting to see it differently. You are starting to acknowledge it. You are starting to integrate it. You are starting the journey toward conscious complexity, toward strategic authenticity, toward integrated wholeness. This does not make your life easy, but it makes it navigable. It makes it honest. It makes it yours. The theater continues. The curtain never falls. The performances never end. But you are no longer just an actor. You are also the director. You are also the audience. You are watching yourself perform, and you are choosing your performances, and you are finding moments where something more real can emerge. This is the wisdom. This is the integration. This is the journey. And it continues every day, in every interaction, in every choice about how to present yourself to the world. Machiavelli would tell you to be strategic, to understand power, to navigate the world as it actually is rather than as you wish it to be. Jung would tell you to be conscious, to integrate your shadow, to become whole within your complexity. Together, they tell you to be both, to be strategic and conscious, to be powerful and integrated, to be effective and whole. This is possible. Elena is doing it. David is doing it. Alex is doing it. And you can do it too. You can acknowledge your masks. You can integrate your shadows. You can be both strategic and authentic, both protected and connected, both successful and whole. The work is hard. The journey is long. The path is not always clear. But it is worth it, because the alternative is to live unconsciously, to be driven by patterns you have not examined, to wear masks you do not even know you are wearing. And that is not living. That is sleepwalking through life, performing roles you did not choose, driven by needs you do not acknowledge. But you are awake now. You are conscious. You are choosing. You are integrating. You are navigating the impossible terrain of being human with more awareness, more intention, more honesty. And this makes all the difference. The theater continues. But you are different. You are conscious. And consciousness is power. Consciousness is freedom. Consciousness is the beginning of wholeness. Elena knows this. David knows this. Alex knows this. And now you know this too. The performances continue. The masks remain. The strategic behavior persists. But you are no longer unconscious. You are no longer driven. You are no longer sleepwalking. You are awake. You are aware. You are choosing. And in that choice, in that awareness, in that consciousness, there is power. There is freedom. There is the possibility of being both strategic and whole, both protected and connected, both successful and authentic. This is the promise. This is the possibility. This is the path. And you are on it now. You have started the journey. You have acknowledged the masks. You have begun the work of integration. The journey continues. The work continues. The consciousness continues. And with each day, with each choice, with each moment of awareness, you become more integrated, more whole, more fully yourself. Not a simple self. Not a purely authentic self. Not a self without masks or performances or strategic behavior, but a conscious self. A self that knows what it is doing and why. A self that chooses its performances rather than being driven by them. A self that integrates its shadows rather than being controlled by them. This is the goal. This is the work. This is the journey. And it is yours now. You have the tools. You have the awareness. You have the choice. What you do with it is up to you. But let us not end here, in abstraction and philosophy. Let us return to the concrete, to the specific, to the moments where these ideas become real. Because consciousness is not just a concept. It is a practice. It is something you do, moment by moment, choice by choice, interaction by interaction. Elena is in a meeting. Her manager is speaking, and she notices something. A micro-expression, a flicker of uncertainty behind his confident presentation. She sees it because she has learned to look for it, because she has learned that everyone is performing, that everyone has moments when the mask slips. And in that moment, she has a choice. She could use this information strategically. She could exploit the uncertainty, position herself as more confident, more capable. This is what she would have done a year ago, unconsciously, automatically, driven by patterns she had not examined. But now she is conscious. Now she sees the choice. And she asks herself, what do I actually want here? She wants to advance. She wants recognition. But she also wants to work in an environment where people support each other, where vulnerability is not immediately exploited. She wants to be strategic, but she also wants to maintain her integrity. So she makes a different choice. She asks a question that allows her manager to clarify his point. That gives him a chance to recover his confidence. She is still being strategic, but she is being strategic in service of the kind of workplace she wants to create. This is conscious performance. This is integrated strategy. This is what it looks like to be both effective and ethical, both powerful and principled. It is not about being purely good or purely selfless. It is about making conscious choices that align with your values, even when those choices are complex, even when they require navigating competing desires. David is having dinner with his family. His son says something dismissive about his daughter, something that is meant to be funny but carries an edge. David feels anger rise up. His instinct is to shut it down immediately, to perform authority, to control the situation. But he is conscious now. He sees the choice. And he asks himself, what do I actually want here? He wants his son to treat his daughter with respect. But he also wants his son to feel heard, to understand why the comment was hurtful rather than just being told it was wrong. He wants to be an authority figure, but he also wants to be a teacher. So he makes a different choice. He asks his son how he thinks his sister felt hearing that comment. He creates space for reflection rather than just imposing consequences. This is conscious parenting. This is integrated authority. This is what it looks like to be both firm and compassionate, both clear about boundaries and open to dialogue. It is not about being permissive or about being authoritarian. It is about making conscious choices that serve both immediate needs and long-term values. Alex is editing a video. He has footage of himself crying, a moment of genuine breakdown that happened during filming. He knows this footage would get engagement. People respond to raw emotion, but he is conscious now. He sees the choice, and he asks himself, what do I actually want here? He wants views. He wants validation, but he also wants to maintain some boundaries, to keep some parts of his experience private. He wants to help people, but he does not want to exploit his own pain for content. So he makes a different choice. He includes a description of the breakdown, talks about what he was feeling, but does not show the footage itself. He is still being vulnerable, still being helpful, but he is also protecting himself. This is conscious content creation. This is integrated authenticity. This is what it looks like to be both open and boundaried, both vulnerable and protected. It is not about sharing everything or sharing nothing. It is about making conscious choices about what to share and what to keep private. Choices that honor both your desire to connect and your need for protection. These are the moments where consciousness becomes real, not in grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but in small choices, in micro decisions, in the constant navigation between competing values and desires. This is what it means to live consciously. This is what it means to integrate your shadows. This is what it means to be both strategic and whole. And these moments are everywhere. Every interaction is an opportunity for conscious choice. Every performance is an opportunity for integration. Every mask is an opportunity for awareness. The work is not to eliminate these moments, but to navigate them consciously, to make choices rather than being driven by unconscious patterns. Elena has another moment later that day. A colleague asks for her help on a project. Elena is busy. She does not have time. Her instinct is to say yes anyway, to perform helpfulness, to maintain her image as a team player. But she is conscious now. She sees the choice, and she asks herself, what do I actually want here? She wants to be helpful, but she also wants to protect her time, to maintain boundaries, to not burn out from constantly saying yes. So she makes a different choice. She says no, but she does it skillfully. She explains her current workload, suggests someone else who might be able to help, offers to assist at a later time when she has more capacity. She is still being strategic, still managing perceptions, but she is also honoring her own needs. This is conscious boundary setting. This is integrated self-care. This is what it looks like to be both collaborative and boundaried, both helpful and self-protective. It is not about being selfish or about being selfless. It is about making conscious choices that honor both your desire to contribute and your need for sustainability. David has another moment that evening. Jennifer asks him how his day was. His instinct is to say fine, to perform calm, to not burden her with his stress. But he is conscious now. He sees the choice, and he asks himself, what do I actually want here? He wants to protect Jennifer from his stress, but he also wants to be more honest, to let her see him more fully, to build deeper connection. So he makes a different choice. He tells her about the difficult meeting, about the frustration he felt, but he does it in a way that invites connection rather than dumping stress. He shares his experience without making it her problem to solve. This is conscious vulnerability. This is integrated honesty. This is what it looks like to be both open and responsible, both honest and considerate. It is not about sharing everything or sharing nothing. It is about making conscious choices about what to share and how to share it. Choices that honor both your need for connection and your partner's capacity to receive. Alex has another moment that night. He is scrolling through social media, seeing other creators' content, feeling that familiar mix of inspiration and jealousy. His instinct is to either dismiss the jealousy as petty or to let it drive him to create more content, to compete, to prove himself. But he is conscious now. He sees the choice, and he asks himself, what do I actually want here? He wants to be successful, but he also wants to create from a place of genuine inspiration rather than competitive anxiety. He wants recognition, but he does not want to be driven by comparison. So he makes a different choice. He acknowledges the jealousy, sits with it, examines what it is telling him about his own desires and insecurities. He uses it as information rather than letting it drive his behavior. This is conscious emotional processing. This is integrated self-awareness. This is what it looks like to be both ambitious and grounded, both driven and self-aware. It is not about eliminating difficult emotions or being controlled by them. It is about making conscious choices about how to respond to them. Choices that honor both your desires and your well-being. These moments accumulate. These choices compound. These practices of consciousness become habits, and these habits become character. Slowly, gradually, you become more integrated, more whole, more consciously yourself. Not a perfect self, not a purely authentic self, but a conscious self. A self that knows what it is doing and why. A self that chooses its performances rather than being driven by them. This is the path. This is the practice. This is what it means to live under the mask while knowing what the mask conceals. It is not a destination. It is a journey. It is not a state you achieve once and maintain forever. It is a practice you return to, moment by moment, choice by choice, interaction by interaction. Elena will have moments when she falls back into unconscious patterns, when she performs without awareness, when she acts from unexamined motivations. But she will also have moments when she catches herself, when she becomes conscious again, when she makes a different choice. And over time, the conscious moments will outnumber the unconscious ones. Over time, the integration will deepen. Over time, she will become more fully herself. David will have moments when he retreats into performance, when he manages his emotions unconsciously, when he prioritizes control over connection. But he will also have moments when he chooses vulnerability, when he shares more of himself, when he builds deeper connection. And over time, his relationships will deepen. Over time, the performances will become less necessary. Over time, he will be more fully known. Alex will have moments when he creates from anxiety, when he chases metrics, when he loses sight of his values. But he will also have moments when he creates from genuine inspiration, when he honors his boundaries, when he acts from conscious choice. And over time, his content will become more aligned with his values. Over time, his need for external validation will decrease. Over time, he will become more grounded in himself. And you will have moments when you fall back into unconscious patterns, when you perform without awareness, when you act from unexamined motivations. But you will also have moments when you catch yourself, when you become conscious again, when you make a different choice. And over time, The conscious moments will outnumber the unconscious ones. Over time, the integration will deepen. Over time, you will become more fully yourself. This is the promise. Not perfection, but progress. Not elimination of masks, but consciousness of them. Not pure authenticity, but integrated complexity. Not a final destination, but a continuous journey. The theater continues. The performances continue. The masks remain. But you are different. You are conscious. You are choosing. You are integrating. And this makes all the difference. Machiavelli would tell you that this consciousness makes you more effective. That understanding your own motivations and strategies makes you better at navigating power, at achieving your goals, at surviving in a complex world. And he would be right. Jung would tell you that this consciousness makes you more whole, that integrating your shadows and acknowledging your complexity makes you more psychologically healthy, more capable of genuine connection, more fully human. And he would be right. Together, they tell you that consciousness makes you both more effective and more whole, that you do not have to choose between success and integrity, between power and authenticity, between strategic competence and psychological health. You can have both. You can be both. You can navigate the world effectively while also being integrated and whole. This is the wisdom. This is the path. This is the practice. And it is available to you right now, in this moment, in every moment. All you have to do is choose consciousness. All you have to do is ask yourself, what am I doing and why? All you have to do is acknowledge your masks, integrate your shadows, make conscious choices. It is simple, but it is not easy. It requires constant vigilance, constant honesty, constant willingness to see things about yourself that are uncomfortable. But it is worth it, because the alternative is to live unconsciously, to be driven by patterns you have not examined, to wear masks you do not even know you are wearing. And you deserve better than that. You deserve to be conscious. You deserve to be integrated. You deserve to be whole. Not because you are special, but because you are human. And being human means having the capacity for consciousness, for choice, for integration. It means having the ability to see yourself clearly and to choose who you want to be. Elena uses this capacity. David uses this capacity. Alex uses this capacity. And you can use this capacity too. You can choose consciousness. You can acknowledge your masks. You can integrate your shadows. You can make choices that align with your values, even when those choices are complex, even when they require navigating competing desires. This is your power. This is your freedom. This is your path to wholeness. And it starts now, in this moment, with this choice. The choice to be conscious. The choice to see clearly. The choice to integrate honestly. The theater continues. But you are no longer just an actor. You are also the director. You are also the audience. You are watching yourself perform, and you are choosing your performances, and you are finding moments where something more real can emerge. This is the wisdom that Machiavelli and Jung offer, when read together, when applied to everyday life. This is what it means to live consciously under the mask. This is what it means to be both strategic and whole, both effective and integrated, both successful and authentic. The journey continues. The work continues. The consciousness continues. And with each moment, with each choice, with each practice of awareness, you become more integrated, more whole, more fully yourself. Not a simple self. Not a purely authentic self. Not a self without masks or performances or strategic behavior, but a conscious self. A self that knows what it is doing and why. A self that chooses its performances rather than being driven by them. A self that integrates its shadows rather than being controlled by them. This is the goal. This is the work. This is the journey. And you are on it now. You have the tools. You have the awareness. You have the choice. What you do with it is up to you. But know this. The work is worth it. The journey is worth it. The consciousness is worth it. Because the alternative is to live unconsciously. To be driven by patterns you have not examined. To wear masks you do not even know you are wearing. And that is not living. That is sleepwalking through life. But you are awake now. You are conscious. You are choosing. And in that consciousness, in that choice, there is power. There is freedom. There's the possibility of being both strategic and whole, both protected and connected, both successful and authentic. This is the promise. This is the possibility. This is the path. And it is yours. Elena walks this path. David walks this path. Alex walks this path. And now you walk this path too. The path of conscious complexity. The path of strategic authenticity. The path of integrated wholeness. The theater continues. The curtain never falls. The performances never end. But you are different now. You are conscious. And consciousness changes everything. You see the masks on others and recognize them for what they are. You see the performances on your timeline and understand the strategy behind them. You see the gap between appearance and reality and are not fooled by it. More importantly, you see your own masks. You acknowledge your own performances. You integrate your own shadows. And in that seeing, in that acknowledging, in that integrating, you find power. The power to choose. The power to navigate. The power to be both strategic and whole. The power to live consciously in a world that rewards performance. The power to be fully human in all your complexity. This is the wisdom. This is the integration. This is the journey. And it continues every day, in every interaction, in every choice about how to present yourself to the world. The work never ends, but it gets easier. The consciousness becomes more natural. The integration becomes more complete. The wholeness becomes more real. Elena knows this. David knows this. Alex knows this. And now you know this too. You know that the masks are necessary. You know that the performances will continue. You know that the strategic behavior is part of being human. But you also know that consciousness is possible. That integration is possible. That wholeness is possible. And this knowledge changes everything. And so we arrive at the final act. Though, as we have established, the curtain never truly falls. The theater of human behavior continues, inside each of us, in every moment, in every interaction. But something has shifted. You have shifted. You are no longer the same person who began this journey. You have seen behind the masks. You have acknowledged the performances. You have begun the work of integration. Elena sits at her desk on a Friday evening. The office is quiet. Most people have left. She is finishing up a report, but her mind is elsewhere. She is thinking about the week, about the performances she gave, about the choices she made. Some of them she is proud of. Some of them she wishes she had handled differently. But all of them were conscious. All of them were chosen. And this makes all the difference. She thinks about the person she was a year ago, performing unconsciously, driven by patterns she had not examined, wearing masks she did not even know she was wearing. And she feels compassion for that person. She was doing her best with the awareness she had. But she also feels grateful that she is no longer that person. She is more conscious now, more integrated, more whole. She shuts down her computer and gathers her things. As she walks to her car, she thinks about her daughter, about the weekend ahead, about the different performances she will give at home. But she does not feel the same exhaustion she used to feel. Because she knows now that the performances are choices. She knows that she can take off the mask when she needs to. She knows that there are people who see her more fully, who witness her complexity, who hold her contradictions without demanding that she simplify. This knowledge makes the performances bearable, more than bearable. It makes them tools rather than prisons. It makes them expressions of care rather than betrayals of authenticity. It makes them part of being human rather than evidence of being fake. David sits in his car in his driveway. He has just gotten home from work. He is taking his usual 5 minutes to transition. But tonight, he does it differently. Instead of just setting aside his work stress, he sits with it. He acknowledges it. He feels it fully. And then he makes a conscious choice about what to bring into his house and what to leave in the car. He decides to share some of it with Jennifer. Not all of it. Not in a way that makes it her problem, but enough to let her see him more fully, to invite connection, to be more honest about his internal experience. This is scary. It risks changing the dynamic they have built, but it also offers the possibility of deeper connection, of being more fully known. He takes a breath and gets out of the car. As he walks to the door, he thinks about the person he was a year ago, performing calm unconsciously, managing his emotions automatically, wearing the mask of stability without even knowing it was a mask. And he feels compassion for that person. He was doing his best with the awareness he had. But he also feels grateful that he is no longer that person. He is more conscious now, more integrated, more whole. He opens the door and greets his family. And as he does, he makes a conscious choice to be both protective and honest, both stable and vulnerable, both the person they need him to be and the person he actually is. This is integration. This is wholeness. This is what it means to live consciously under the mask. Alex sits at his computer, looking at the video he just finished editing. It is good. It is helpful. It is both strategic and authentic. He has found a way to be vulnerable without exploiting his pain, to be honest without oversharing, to help people while also protecting himself. This is the balance he has been searching for. This is the integration he has been working toward. He thinks about the person he was a year ago, performing authenticity unconsciously, chasing metrics automatically, wearing the mask of vulnerability without even knowing it was a mask. And he feels compassion for that person. He was doing his best with the awareness he had. But he also feels grateful that he is no longer that person. He is more conscious now, more integrated, more whole. He uploads the video and closes his laptop. As he does, he makes a conscious choice to not check the metrics obsessively, to not measure his worth by engagement, to not let external validation determine his internal state. This is hard. The pull is strong. But he is conscious now. He sees the pattern, and he can choose differently. This is the work. This is the practice. This is what it means to live consciously in a world that rewards performance. It is not about eliminating the performances or the strategies or the masks. It is about being conscious of them. It is about choosing them rather than being driven by them. It is about integrating them into a coherent sense of self rather than being fragmented by them. And you are doing this work too. You are making these choices. You are practicing this consciousness. You are integrating these contradictions. You are becoming more whole, more integrated, more fully yourself. Not a simple self, not a purely authentic self, but a conscious self, a self that knows what it is doing and why. This is the transformation that happens when you see behind the masks, when you acknowledge the performances, when you integrate the shadows. You do not become perfect. You do not become purely authentic. You do not eliminate your strategic behavior, but you become conscious. And consciousness is everything. Consciousness is the difference between being driven and being directed, between being fragmented and being integrated, between being unconscious and being whole. Consciousness is the power to choose, to navigate, to be both strategic and authentic, both protected and connected, both successful and whole. This is what Machiavelli and Jung offer when read together, when applied to everyday life. Machiavelli offers the tools to understand power, to navigate systems, to be effective in the world as it actually is. Jung offers the tools to understand yourself, to integrate your shadows, to be whole within your complexity. Together, they offer a path of conscious navigation, of strategic authenticity, of integrated wholeness. Elena walks this path. David walks this path. Alex walks this path. And you walk this path too. The path is not easy. It requires constant work, constant honesty, constant willingness to see things that are uncomfortable. But it is worth it, because the alternative is to live unconsciously, to be driven by patterns you have not examined, to wear masks you do not even know you are wearing. And you deserve better than that. You deserve to be conscious. You deserve to be integrated. You deserve to be whole, not because you are special, but because you are human. And being human means having the capacity for consciousness, for choice, for integration. The theater continues. The performances continue. The masks remain. But you are different now. You are conscious. You are choosing. You are integrating. And this makes all the difference. You see the world differently. You see the masks on others and recognize them for what they are. You see the performances on your timeline and understand the strategy behind them. You see the gap between appearance and reality and are not fooled by it. You have compassion for the complexity of being human, for the impossible task of navigating a world that requires both authenticity and performance. You see yourself differently. You see your own masks without shame. You see your own performances without guilt. You see your own strategic behavior without judgment. You acknowledge your complexity. Integrate your shadow. Own your contradictions. You are more honest with yourself, and this honesty makes you more powerful. You navigate relationships differently. You know when you are performing and why. You choose when to be strategic and when to be vulnerable. You find people who can witness your complexity, who can see beneath your masks, who can hold your contradictions without demanding that you simplify. And with these people, you build connections that are both strategic and genuine, both protected and real. This is the wisdom that emerges from the theater of human behavior. This is what it means to live consciously under the mask. This is what it means to be both strategic and whole, both effective and integrated, both successful and authentic. The journey does not end. The work does not stop. The consciousness must be practiced moment by moment, choice by choice, interaction by interaction. But it gets easier. The awareness becomes more natural. The integration becomes more complete. The wholeness becomes more real. Elena will continue to navigate office politics, but she will do it consciously, strategically, in service of values she has chosen. David will continue to manage his emotions, but he will do it consciously, intentionally, in ways that serve both protection and connection. Alex will continue to create content, but he will do it consciously, authentically, in ways that honor both his desire to help and his need for boundaries. And you will continue to navigate your own theater, your own performances, your own masks. But you will do it differently now. You will do it consciously. You will see the choices. You will acknowledge the complexity. You will integrate the contradictions. You will be both strategic and whole. This is the promise. This is the possibility. This is the path. And you are on it now. You have started the journey. You have acknowledged the masks. You have begun the work of integration. The rest is practice. The rest is showing up, moment by moment, choice by choice, and choosing consciousness over unconsciousness, integration over fragmentation, wholeness over division. The theater continues. But you are no longer just an actor. You are also the director. You are also the audience. You are watching yourself perform, and you are choosing your performances, and you are finding moments where something more real can emerge. You are living under the mask, while also knowing what the mask conceals. You are navigating the impossible terrain of being human, with as much consciousness as you can muster. This is enough. This is everything. This is the wisdom, the integration, the journey. And it is yours now. You have the tools. You have the awareness. You have the choice. What you do with it is up to you. But know that the work is worth it. The journey is worth it. The consciousness is worth it. Because the alternative is to live unconsciously. And you are no longer willing to do that. You have seen behind the curtain. You have acknowledged the theater. You have started the work of integration. And there is no going back. You are conscious now. And consciousness changes everything. And so, the curtain falls on this act. But the show continues, inside each of us, in the silence of our thoughts. The mask we have analyzed today. You may know it well. You may wear it. Or perhaps you see it in someone you love. The comment section below is not a place for judgment. It is our stage for confessions, a safe space for observers. Use that space to share your story. What mask did you have to wear to survive? We want to hear from you. And if you felt understood here, subscribe. Because here, you are not alone. Together, we will keep unraveling human theater, one mask at a time. The next act is about to begin.